famous photographers recently toured the country with their photographs, images that help tell the story of rock and roll's classic era. Dan Godwin sat down with them for tonight's Fox Forward.
It is great to say hello to Henry Diltz and Patty Boyd. Their work is featured in Behind the Lens, a unique touring gallery. Henry, one of the most celebrated photographers of the 20th century, including 400 album covers featuring many music luminaries. Patty Boyd is a photographer of musicians and landscapes who used to be married to both George Harrison and later Eric Clapton. Thank you both for coming in.
Thank you.
Sure, Dan, thank you.
In Behind the Lens, you show many of your photographs and tell the stories behind them. Henry, this first album cover for Crosby, Stills and Nash, became, of course, a very iconic image. What do you think makes this exceptional?
Well, partly it was because of the music was so great. And partly it was because it was a fold-out cover, and it was printed on the back of the paper instead of the glossy side. It had a rough finish to it. So all of those things made it kind of different. And, you know, they were sitting actually in the wrong order because they hadn't named themselves yet when we took the photo. So we went back to, it was Nash, Stills, and Crosby. So we went back a few days later to retake the photo in the right order, and the house was gone.
And Patty, here's one of your shots of Eric Clapton from a tour, 1974, I believe, on which you accompanied him.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this?
So for me, it was fascinating to be going on tour because I'd never done it before. I couldn't go on tour with the Beatles because I think they were just worried about, security for them. It was massive in those days. And so being on tour with Eric was the first time I'd ever done it, and it was really fun.
Eric looks like it's after a show, and he seems very subdued, very drained.
Yes. I think he'd just taken a shower, and then he came into the sort of sitting room area. And obviously still thinking about the show.
Henry, here's a couple of photogenic guys. Ronnie Wood, Keith Richards, looking very cheerful. This was, what, 1979, a tour of Ronnie Wood's. What do you remember?
Yes, but for the last gig, they took a little Learjet from LA down to San Diego. So these guys were sitting right across from me for 45 minutes. So I just sat there clicking away, and they were a captive audience. But really, I was the captive audience because they were constantly doing shtick,
And Patty, a photo of you and George. But on this one, you would technically deserve the credit.
We came back from India, and I was really thrilled to see our garden in England had got the roses blooming, and they were looking fantastic. So I set up my tripod, and I said, George, come just stand with me, because I want to photograph the roses. Nothing to do with him and me, of course. So we were both standing there, and I turned on the timer. He's obviously bored, waiting for the clicker to go, and it didn't. And he just looks away slightly, which I think, in fact, makes the photograph.
And Patty, when you met George Harrison, you were a successful model in London, and there's a photo that he took of you.
And so we found this house about half an hour out of London, and when we went to go and see it, George took photos of me, and you can tell that it's, no one had lived there for a while because the grass is quite long and little weeds and buttercups are there. And I was 19 at the time, and George took those 3 photos.
Well, Patty and Henry, thank you so much for the chat. Now, for more information about Behind the Lens, as well as the gallery in New York and Los Angeles that houses all of your photographs, we've got links on our website. Just go to fox4news.com.